welcome back to everyone. Good afternoon. Again, my name is Sandra Woodley, President of the University of Louisiana System and also the Chair of the Northwestern State University Presidential Search Committee. We're glad to see you back to the second of two meetings with the Search Committee. And before we begin our proceedings this afternoon, I would just like to mention that if there is any member of the public who wishes to make a comment, you must complete a blue card, and we have UL System staff here. They'll wave their hands. Feel free to fill out a testimony card and give it to them, and then when we get to the end of the session today, we will entertain as many of those questions as we have time to. The comments will also be entertained as well. We'll have a 3-minute time limit on those so we can get through the proceedings and make sure that the candidate has time to meet with all of the stakeholders as well. As always, we respectfully request that you turn your cell phones off, and I'll look at mine, it's off. Thank you very much for that. And Erica, if you will, please call the roll.
Dr. Sandra Woodley.
Here.
Dr. Massimo Bazzori.
Here.
Mr. Edward Crawford.
Here.
Ms. Lola Donahoe. Dr. Kelly Faircloth. Mr. E. Gerald Hebert. Mr. Adam Lepore. Mr. Jimmy Long.
Here.
Mr. Wayne Parker. Mr. Mark Romero. Mr. Carl Shetler. Mr. Robert Shreve. Mr. Winfred Sabille.
Here.
Mr. Joe Stamey.
Here.
Ms. Kyla Winey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, and as we did this morning, I think it would be beneficial if the committee members could just briefly introduce themselves and their role, and we'll start with you, Kyla.
Hello, my name is Kyla Winey. I'm the Student Government Association President here at Northwestern, and I'm a Senior Mass Communications major from Lafayette.
My name is Massimo Bazzori, Professor of Chemistry in the Scholars College, and I'm here as Faculty Senate President.
Hi, I'm Adam Lepore. I'm the UL System Board Member. I'm from Nicholls State, and I'm a junior.
My name is Ed Crawford. I'm a member of the Board of Supervisors. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana.
I'm Jimmy Long, member of the board from Natchitoches. Thank you for being here.
Winfred Sabille, member of the board, Sunset.
Robert Shreve, member of the board from Baton Rouge.
Joe Stamey from Natchitoches, Northwestern State University Alumni Association President.
I'm Lola Donahoe from Natchitoches. I'm the Northwestern State University's Foundation Board President.
Thank you very much. Of course, the purpose of this meeting this afternoon is to interview the second of our 4 semifinalists, Dr. Lisa Abney. This morning, we interviewed Dr. James Henderson, and then tomorrow, we will be interviewing Dr. Renva Watterson and Dr. Linda Rinker. In addition to the search committee interviews, the candidates are also meeting with various stakeholder groups throughout the day. They'll have opportunities to meet with community leaders and alumni and students and faculty. This committee will gather the input from our representatives from those meetings as well. It's very important to get your input into this decision, which we'll be making on Friday. On Friday, after all 4 interviews have concluded, the committee's goal is to narrow the list of 4 down to the 2 finalists, at least 2 finalists, that will then go before the Board of Supervisors on September the 23rd to make the final decision for whom will be the next president at Northwestern University. There are several ways that you can participate. As we mentioned earlier, you're welcome to fill out a card if you would like to speak in a moment, and then later you can fill out a yellow card if you would like to list a question for Dr. Hughes to present to the candidate at the end of the questioning. You can also have anonymous reflections that will be shared only with the committee. There's a website. We have staff who can take your comments. You can write it on a cocktail napkin, whatever way that is useful for you to get your input to us. We very much want to hear it. We're always happy to entertain your thoughts, your questions, and your comments during this process. Do any of the committee members have any particular questions before we get started on this afternoon's session? Are there any public comments at this time, Dr. Hughes?
There are no requests for public comment.
Okay. Now, before we begin our interview with Dr. Lisa Abney, I would like to share with you a little bit about the framework for today. Dr. Abney will come in and share an opening statement with the search committee, and after the search committee has completed the questioning, then Dr. Carla Hughes will address any questions that you all have submitted to her through this process with the yellow card. Again, any of our staff members, we have some student members who can take your yellow cards as well if you have a question that you would like to be entertained. As was the case this morning, there's a very tight schedule, so we want to make sure that we can, entertain as many questions as possible during the timeline. Once Dr. Abney has been interviewed, and then we have an executive session with the committee to talk about personnel matters, then we'll return to the open session and recess this afternoon until 10:15 tomorrow, at which time we'll be interviewing Dr. Renva Watterson. Okay, at this time I would like to invite Dr. Lisa Abney and her husband, Douglas Hollingsworth, to the table. And I'll just give you a little background as they come in. Dr. Abney has served as Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Northwestern State since 2009. She represents the university at the Louisiana Board of Regents State Council for Workforce and Economic Development Officers. Prior to her appointment as provost, she served as dean of the College of Liberal Arts, the department head of Language and Communication, the director of NSU Writing Project, and also the director at Louisiana Folk Life Center. Dr. Abney has written more than 20 successfully funded humanities and public programming grants. She's authored more than 25 articles regarding language and literature of the American South and folklore, and has presented her work at numerous professional conferences. She's past president of Southeastern Conference on Linguistics. In 2004, she received the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, Special Humanities Award, and the College of Liberal Arts Excellence in Teaching Award. In 2007, she received the university's Mildred Hart Bailey Research Award. Lisa has also served as a board member for the Natchitoches History Foundation and the Natchitoches NSU Folk Festival. And along with her administrative duties, she continues to conduct research in linguistics, folklore, and literature of the American South, and also teaching courses in all of these fields. Dr. Abney earned her doctorate in English at the University of Houston. Her master's degree in English and bachelor's degree in Spanish were awarded by Texas A&M, so she's an Aggie. And a demon as well, an Aggie and a demon. And I mean that in the most positive way. Thank you so much, Dr. Abney. And at this time, if you'll introduce your husband and also make any opening comments that you would like.
I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's quite an honor to be in the semifinalists, and I'm blessed to be here, and I really appreciate your time. I have with me my husband, Douglas Hollingsworth. He works for the Rapides Parish Sheriff's Department as a major. He's over all of corrections in Rapides Parish, so he's a fairly busy man himself, but loves Northwestern and comes to all of our events, and bless his heart, has sat through more academic events than probably he ever thought he would have to do in his life. So. Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to add that I'm very excited about this opportunity. I think Northwestern has a brilliant future ahead of us. We have a wonderful legacy of 130 years. Not many institutions can speak to that, but we certainly can. We have a lot of great potential ahead, and I think that in the future we're going to see some major developments in terms of our ability to form partnerships with business and industry, to do more outreach with international recruiting, as well as our community college and transfer partners that we've worked very diligently with over the past 5 years. So I think it'll be exciting.
Okay, as you know, our athletics is one of the key roles in the overall makeup of Northwestern. What are your thoughts about how to balance the priorities of academics and athletics at Northwestern?
Thank you. That's an excellent question and one that I had to field earlier today. I think that athletics is very, very important to Northwestern. It's a huge recruiting tool and a huge retention tool for us. But just as we're having to look outside in academic and student affairs for external funding, I think we've got to increase our external funding as well for athletics. I think it's absolutely crucial to the university that we have a good, strong athletic program. We have a wonderful set of staff there. Our recent NCAA grant, which is going to enhance academic work in that area, is incredible, and our consistently good APR and GSR have really set us apart, as you've seen through the Southland Conference awards that we've won. So I'm very glad to have that opportunity, and I think athletics is a huge benefit for us. Recently, of course, we had football start, we've had soccer start, and it's been a lot of fun to see those two sports get off the ground and sort of get us back into the school year.
Thank you.
Hi, why did you apply for this position? Why Northwestern?
Well, a couple of reasons, primarily because I think the institution does have a brilliant future ahead, and I'd like to contribute to that. I think that this institution is really poised to do some things that are unique that other institutions haven't done in terms of our ability to deliver distance ed courses and to do technologically inventive things. And I see that our faculty are ready to do that sort of work, and I want to be a part of it.
Lisa, you and I have met last week. I had the opportunity, as I do with all the universities, to come and meet with the management team, talk about strategic planning, and also particularly about the WISE program. Mm-hmm. And so, I think if you could give the committee the benefit of the thoughts that you have and the team at Northwestern about how you may utilize that money and how important that is for your future here at the university in the programs.
Thank you. Absolutely. We're very excited about the WISE funding. When we heard the announcement that it was underway and that it was, working its way through the legislature, we immediately I called a committee together from the disciplines that are primarily associated with that WISE funding, which are business, accounting, CIS, engineering, technology, nursing, and education. And we sat down around a table and we began to talk about what we would do with the funding, how we would make this, best maximized for the institution. So we started there and we began to really look hard at our match and figure out, what kind of match we already have coming in, what kind of match do we have in the future. We've been very lucky to have good faculty and staff who have worked very diligently to form some recent partnerships. Dr. Ali Ahmad in engineering technology particularly has worked with Reliability Services, and they are on our campus offering professional development and working with us through a mutual partnership, and that's one of those elements that we're very excited about. Weyerhaeuser was here 2 weeks ago doing training in our facilities with their staff, and we just think that's a great example of that kind of business and industry partnership. And that really was a result of GRAD Act work and also this WISE work. With our WISE funding, we would like to use a good portion of it to sustain short-term faculty appointments in those areas of engineering technology and CIS where we know we will need to be producing a lot of majors very quickly. We are also working diligently to make sure that our proposal aligns with the requirements of the block funding, because we know that those can be sometimes a little challenging to make sure that your proposal lines up exactly the way it needs to. But I think because of our underserved populations in our region, we won't have any trouble making that work very well for us. We are also looking at the expansion, like I said, of our CIS and EET programs, but accounting as well. Accounting is one of those areas that, of course, as you may know, accounting professors cost a fairly significant amount of funding, and so we will be looking at working to enhance that area as well.
Lola Donahue?
Dr. Abney, with the current situation as far as our state funding, we know we have to look for alternate funding. How would you identify some of the sources of alternate funding, for Northwestern, and how would you capture that?
I think that's a great question. We have got to look at business and industry partnerships, not just asking business to give us money, because that's not going to take us very far. I think what we really have to do is get out there and show business and industry what Northwestern can do for them, what we can do to bring value to their companies and help them with professional development, compliance. I know all of us, if you're in business, you've dealt with issues regarding compliance, whether it's ADA compliance, whether it's Title IX compliance. I mean, we all have had to deal with compliance issues. And I think that companies need that kind of assistance. And so that, coupled with, of course, aggressive fundraising campaigns, which the deans and I recently had our retreat, and that's one of the things we addressed was the need for enhancing fundraising within each of the colleges to help shore up the faculty research support and things like that. So that's part of our agenda already, and we've got to be sure and coordinate all this with the foundation to make sure that we're not all asking the same donors for the same things. You know, people do wear out from being asked too many times. But I think that if, with a good coordinated plan and some hard work on the part of department heads and faculty and administrators getting out there and asking and talking and becoming parts of those communities that we haven't really been a part of. For instance, in Shreveport, I have a fairly strong indication that we have many potential students there that we're not reaching, partially because we're not in those business communities and we're not in those local communities in the same visible way that we are in the Natchitoches community. And the same thing can be said for Alexandria as well. We need to redouble our efforts to be there and to make those connections.
Thank you.
Our faculty member, Mr. Bizzaro.
Hi, Lisa. How are you doing?
Great, thank you.
You've been a provost here at NSU for some years, and we know each other quite well. It's difficult for me to ask you a question that I already don't know the answer to, but I guess what I'd like for you is to tell everybody what you think are the three major issues, problems, or situations facing NSU. This, I think, carries on from the previous question. Yeah. And what are the two things you are most proud of in your tenure as provost at NSU?
I'm just making notes so I don't lose track of the question. I think the three challenges really do stem from our lack of funding that we've had over the years. So I'll just start. One that is a huge concern to me and keeps me awake at night is faculty retention, okay, which ties to faculty salary, faculty load, and compression of faculty salaries. That's something that really does worry me, and I think that we have to have a good, strong faculty in order to maintain the university. I think that we have done the things that we've needed to do in order to make sure all of our programs are efficient. You know, we do yearly academic program review. We, of course, eliminated programs when the Board of Regents' low completer numbers were about to change, and we had to do those things to be proactive and to handle our own business. But I think at this point now, we really are at that point where we have to start rebuilding the departments. And I spoke about this earlier in my community session when Joe was in there. We've got to get the faculty numbers in those areas that have been depleted rebuilt. So that's one huge challenge I think that we face, though not insurmountable. I think the second piece is we really need to look at our redoubling of our program for replacement of faculty hardware on their computers. Faculty hardware and software is really an important issue for us. We're fine right now, but looking 2, 3, 5 years out, we need to be prepared that we're going to have to do some major infrastructure renovations, and so that's something that concerns me. And of course, just in general, facilities. We have 3 campuses, all of which need attention. And it's expensive to maintain 3 campuses. Our Leesville campus, our Shreveport campus, and our Natchitoches campus, all 3 have buildings that need some pretty serious repair. And I know I'm not alone in mentioning this. I know other universities struggle with this as well. But particularly in light of our enhanced retention efforts. I think it's particularly important because students respond to the environments they're in. So if they're in a building that's not great, they're not going to perform to their optimum level. I really do believe that, and I've seen the evidence of it when I've been on campus and gone from building to building teaching. So I think that those are three big challenges. Things that I'm proudest of, I don't think anything is ever, I'm not taking any credit for this on my own, you understand, because I don't think anybody ever does anything in isolation, but I'm very proud of the fact that we've been able to align all of our programs with workforce needs, that we've taken every program we have, we've mapped it onto workforce, and then we've developed new programs that align with workforce needs. So we now are looking at our final approval on our Doctor of Nursing practice, which has been a huge need for North Louisiana. Our Bachelor of Applied Science and Allied Health, which is the only Bachelor of Applied Science in the state, and we did that in response to the fact that the community colleges ask us to formulate degrees where students could easily transfer in. We're in the process of creating the Bachelor of Applied Science in Resource Management, which will be another one of those degrees designed really to ease the transition from community college students into a four-year degree, to a completion degree, and we're very excited about that. So that particular area is something I'm very proud of. The second piece is I'm always very proud to look out at graduation and see our students. That's my happiest moment, when I can see our students and our faculty and see all that they've accomplished. Our students, as many of you know, come from an array of backgrounds, many of our students are first-generation students. They struggle to make ends meet. Tuition has increased 38% since 2008, and for students who are in our particular socioeconomic stratum, it's a particularly difficult thing for those students to stay in school. So I'm very proud of all of our efforts we've made with retention and student success. We've put a whole lot of time and energy into it. I know many of our faculty and department heads are exhausted because of all the work that they do. Calling students, getting them re-enrolled. When students don't do well, we have an early alert system. So if they are faltering at midterm, they get a call from an academic advisor or a support staff member, they get a letter. There are lots of ways that we reach out to them to make sure that we pull them back in. And certainly if they don't re-enroll, we stalk them all summer long to get them back in for the fall, certainly. So I'm very proud of those efforts.
It's always a good idea to stalk students when they need to be stalked.
In a good way.
I'm very in favor of that process. Joe Stamey.
Dr. Abney, support for the President Peace Festival involved faculty, students, staff, and alumni. What would you do and what have you done as an administrator to promote these interactions and connections?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that. I love working with students. I love working with alumni. I think it's very important for us to have events where all these people can come together. And we certainly see this with our freshman convocation event, where people from the community oftentimes come and participate in that. Certainly at graduation, we always see them. We have athletic events, as you well know. We have lots of receptions on campus. But I think we can expand that, and I think we need to. It was interesting this morning when I visited with the students because they said, well, we would like to see more faculty at our events. And I said, well, that's great. I said, have you invited faculty to your events? And they said, oh, yeah, well, we just assumed they wanted to come, they would come. And I said, no, old people like us will not crash your events. And so I think if we can do more with actually working, across all of these groups to pull together some events that will really add value for our students, because interaction with you would be a great thing for a young person who wants to go to law school or go into business. Meeting somebody who's out and doing great things in his or her life provides a model for students, and I think it's really important that we do that. So absolutely, I think that that's something we can look at doing. Certainly, we have worked with advisory councils in all the colleges to involve alumni where we can, to bring them back to campus to help give us some advice. I believe you serve on the School of Business Advisory Council, and lots of other faculty, lots of other alumni do as well. So I think those are very important.
Robert Shreve.
It's a question for you, Doug. Have you ever not seen a smile on this lady's face?
Oh, she's always smiling. She's always in a good mood.
It's a great asset you have.
I'll give you $20 later.
That is a great asset you have, and Lisa, seriously, I've never met you and ever not seen that smile. and you represent this university very, very well. So I'm going to ask a very tough question of you. Okay, first off, it's very evident the experience you've had here for the number of years you've been here. My goodness, the STEM programs and all the other elements of involvement. So the skill set of experience, I think, is not in question in your passion towards this university. Give us in the audience a reason why you would be qualified to hold a leadership position other than how you have led these various elements to what that position would be at this university, and give me what you think that definition of leadership needs to be at this university. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. I think the leader of this university has to be somebody who can build consensus. I think that this university particularly revolves around the relationships, not unlike a lot of other universities, but because we are a small community, people know each other. And so it's very important to work openly and have a lot of transparency. I believe firmly that you have to share information when you have it. People may not always like what you have to say when you have to give bad news, but if you're up front and you put it out there, you'll gain a lot more, I think, a lot more support than if you just, sort of try to whitewash it and sweep it under the rug. So I think transparency is very important for a new leader. I think consensus building, communication, working effectively with other people, not just on campus, but of course our regional constituents as well. And that's something that, I think is an exciting opportunity for us at Northwestern. And I know Dr. Webb has done a lot of that in his work with the Committee of 100 in Shreveport and in different business and industry programs with whom he works. But I think we have to expand that. And we really have to get, the new leader is going to have to be very visible with business and industry and also still maintain visibility on campus and be able to walk around and visit with students, visit with faculty, visit with staff, find out what's going well and what's going not so well, because we know things don't go well always. So I think the new leader has to have the vision for that. My experiences in life have, I think, led me to this. I've held a lot of different jobs during my time in academia, from being a faculty member here, and then when I was at University of Houston downtown, and I worked with multicultural groups. I worked with summer camps for at-risk Hispanic kids. I worked, doing academic advising at an open admissions university, not unlike the school that we were when I came here. And it's tremendous to see the changes that have happened during that time. So I think the sum total of my experiences would help me to be a good leader. I think because while I'm not a person who was a business major, I understand business and I understand how marketing and management have to go hand in hand with any endeavor, because you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't market it and you don't manage it right, you're not going to sell it and you're not going to have it succeed. So I think that those are things that help me to be a good leader.
Thank you very much, Dr. Woodley. I do have a question, but before I ask the question, let me thank you for bringing Doug with you.
You're welcome.
I've known Doug a long time. He is a deputy sheriff, and his father was the sheriff of Rapides Parish for many years, Sheriff Hollingsworth. Doug, it's good to have you with us. Dr. Abney, the question that I want to ask you, and I know you have served in so many areas on the campus that this would not be a difficult question for you to answer. What do you perceive to be the strength of Northwestern?
Thank you. I think the strength of Northwestern is our people. We have the most hardworking faculty and staff and the best students of any university in the world, I think. Of course, I'm probably biased, but we have some amazing faculty. The things that they have done during this period that we've been through when things have been so difficult, their loads have been incredibly high, yet they have managed to create amazing things with their students, and they keep their students engaged and embrace the campus in a way that a lot of people might not have done. So I think that the strength of this institution is its people.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ed Crawford?
At least it's always my job to ask the finance question. I take you that direction. Recognizing, as you obviously do, that there's been significant cutback in state funding and increasing load on students. How do you see keeping the books balanced and continuing to allocate the resources that you do have in a strategic way? You may not have as much as you want, so how would you deal with that? How would you prioritize?
Well, I'm very glad you asked that. I've really been working a lot on this lately and thinking a lot about it. Dr. Woodley and I talked some last night at dinner about this. I think that two things have to happen. One, and we are already underway with this. We've created a committee called the 511 Committee, which is going to examine every process that we have on this campus. It didn't really grow out of a need to look at financial things. It grew out of a need to improve student service. And so, because we know we have a lot of processes on our campus, like a lot of campuses do, that are really processes that have been in place a long time, and maybe we've just kept doing these things this way because we've always done it this way. And maybe it needs to continue, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe we could streamline it. Maybe we could combine it with something else. So the 511 Committee is going to be examining every process on campus. We're starting with academic and student affairs, but we will be working our way across campus to look at how we can increase productivity and efficiency. The second piece of this is, I think we have to look at all of our revenues and our resources and really take a critical eye at all of our assets right now. And if it's time to look at doing some lease backs or some agricultural leases maybe. We have a lot of land. The good news is Northwestern is land rich. We have lots of land. But we also could maybe be looking at that as a revenue stream that we haven't been able to tap into, and maybe if we had, more aggressively marketed, or reached out, we might be able to do something with that. And if we need to liquidate pieces that are not really in our best interest to hold on to anymore, that also may be something we need to look at. Certainly continuing then to build partnerships, because that's a stopgap. You can't rely on that revenue forever, whether it's a land sale or a lease back. But I think that you can use that as a stepping stone to leverage, your additional fundraising. So I think external fundraising is going to go hand in hand with this. I think the more partnerships we can build with business and industry, that brings more revenue in, which then allows us to move some money around, and things that we would normally be paying for out of operating fund or out of reserves, we now might be able to pay for out of these partnership monies that are generated through professional development activities. So I think it's a really threefold approach. And then finally, I think we have to look at all of our existing offices and look at attrition as people retire. Maybe changing people's job descriptions and looking at that. I don't think we can go any deeper in academic and student affairs. I think we've cut as many programs as we can cut. I think at some point you begin to cut into revenue. Now, if you've got a non-productive program, that's a different animal. But just to make a cut to try to balance the budget is short-sighted. It seems short-sighted to me. So I think it's going to take some work. But again, I think talking through the process, getting people to be involved in the process so that people understand, hey, this is all the money we have, and what are the decisions we're going to make as we move forward to make the best use of this money. Because we know state funding is continuing to, be a tenuous endeavor, and even student funding is tenuous, because we know the population of students we have. We have a high number of non-traditional online students. Those students tend to take 1 or 2 classes a semester, and then they might stop out a year or 2 and then come back. And so we don't have the same kind of student populations that some institutions have, where you can count on, okay, I'm going to have this many students every year. We have to always be aware of that. Thank you. That it was innovative, that we looked at education, and this is something that I talked a little bit about with the faculty, that it would be innovative, that we look at higher ed and we really think about what we could do differently. You know, okay, let's just start, say we were starting over, how would you reinvent higher ed to make it be more in line with what workforce needs, what the region needs, what the state needs? You know, that sort of thing. So I would like to be seen as an innovator and a consensus builder, because I think it is very important to have consensus, because it doesn't matter how many great ideas you have, if no one likes to work with you and no one will work with you, you won't get very far. So I think that those are two things that I would like to be remembered for.
Dr. Abney, we spoke about cooperation with industry. Do you have any plans, preliminary plans about cooperating with additional 2- and 4-year universities?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that. We have worked so well with the community college system, and I'm so happy with the partnerships we have. We recently signed an agreement with Northwest Louisiana Technical College here in Natchitoches, where we are now giving 6 hours of credit for the C4M, the Certificate for Manufacturing that they offer. We're giving students 6 hours of college credit so that they can have a connection to Northwestern when they finish that program. We have worked really diligently with a lot of community college partners across the state to extend our ULS tuition discounting mechanism to the staff at those institutions as well. So that helps them because they're able to have more SACS credentialed faculty, SACS COC credentialed faculty, and then that helps us as well because we're able to obtain them as students. So I think that those are very important, those partnerships, and I don't see that changing. We love to work with LCTCS. We work closely with Will Wainwright, and it's, you know, all across the state. You know, with BIPSI, we have a very strong connection at BIPSI, Louisiana Delta Community College as well. So we plan to continue that. We recently signed a space sharing, dorm sharing agreement with Centenary because they had dorm space, and our College of Nursing and Allied Health needed some dorm space. So that has worked out beautifully, and in the spring we think that that's going to be a real boon for our folks going into clinical in Shreveport. Now they'll have somewhere to live that's close to our campus, and that helps Centenary as well. So we do a lot of partnership work, and I don't see that changing in the future. I think if anything, it will be expanding. I think we're going to have to look at that. Certainly, Jim Clinton and I had a good talk, Jim Clinton from CLETA and I had a good talk not long ago about the expansion of partnerships across institutions, not just educational institutions, but also those kinds of business government entities. And I think that that'll be a win-win for everybody.
Thank you.
Lisa, I think it's difficult to be an internal candidate. I mean, on the one hand, it has a lot of positives because certainly you've got such great knowledge and expertise and experience about the very university. And on the other hand, you know, you've been at an institution where, as in every institution, there are challenging times and difficult decisions and, you know, maybe things to overcome from things that could have been, you know, handled better. So, you know, I think what I would like to know is, you know, as you come in here as, you know, the internal candidate, how challenging is that for you? And are there particular things that have happened in your tenure as part of the management team that you've learned from that, you know, you would like to, you know, talk about those challenges?
Thank you. It is tougher being the internal candidate, and I think anyone who was in my faculty session earlier probably heard some pretty direct questions, and I was happy to give the answers to them. I think it's simultaneously sometimes a detriment, but I think overall, people know me. They know my personality. They know I try to be as honest as possible. If I'm not, it's usually because I just don't know something. And I think that it is difficult, but you know, it's part of the way these searches go sometimes, and I'm happy to be here. But yes, I have learned a lot from things that we have done in the past. You know, when we went through our program reduction, that was an extremely trying time, and that was a situation where we all work together as a cabinet to make those decisions, and then, of course, with the guidance from the system and the attorneys. But it was a very painful process, not just professionally to think about those productions of those programs and the loss of those faculty, but because here, this is a small town. We're all, we all know each other on some level, and it's, it was very hard to, have to say goodbye to colleagues of mine that I had known for years. And previous to that, rounds of layoffs that we had had, that was very painful to have to say goodbye to people who had, who I had known and gone to baby showers for and given baby showers for. I mean, these are close personal relationships. So it's very hard when you're the internal candidate in that respect, because there is a history, but I'm hopeful that we can overcome that.
Well, and final question for me is, the presidency position, and I know this is my first presidency, so, as in your case, I went through many, many opportunities to be at the vice president level and to be on the executive cabinet. From experience, I can tell you the political wind chill is much different at this level than it was at the VP level. And so talk a little bit about your thoughts about how, if you become a first-time president, you can adapt to all that comes with the political pressures of that job.
Yeah, and I know they are tremendous. I know that's a very difficult thing. First, I believe I would seek out the advice of my peers and fellow presidents about handling things. The good news is we have very strong working relationships with our local legislators and our local politicians. So I think in some ways, that's a wonderful thing, because those relationships are already there. I've known these people a long time. But again, everything is political, and it's even more so when you're the president. And I'm aware that it's a big, it plays a big role. And certainly when you look at larger issues that are not in your control, like funding and working with legislators to try to help them to see your point of view, that can be daunting, especially when they're not your legislators. It's a little tougher to work that. Do my best.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you very much. And are there questions, additional follow-up questions from the committee before we go to the comment cards? Does anyone else have any additional? Okay, Carla, do we have questions or comments from the audience?
Dr. Woodley, we have 2 questions from the audience and 1 question sent directly to the system office. Before I begin addressing questions to Dr. Abney, I would like to remind the audience that if they would like their question considered, they must fill out a yellow question card and turn it into one of the staff members. We will ask as many questions as time allows. I will take editorial privilege and combine questions if they're on the same topic. And we have until 2:45 when we need to go into the next session. So let's begin. Dr. Abney, the first question comes from a faculty member, and you have alluded to this in some of your questions, but this individual would like to know why the faculty should believe that were you to be the president, that things will change and be different than they have been during the previous administration.
Well, that's a sticky question, but I will say this. I will do my very best to make positive changes wherever I can. Now, is everything going to be different the first week on the job? No, because Rome wasn't built in a day, and the problems that we have at Northwestern didn't arise overnight. But I can commit to the fact that we will move forward and we will do things collaboratively with input from everyone. This is not an endeavor that I just take on. I never have operated that way, and I don't intend to start operating that way. I think things have to happen collaboratively and jointly. And no, they're not going to change overnight, but I do think change is on the horizon.
Thank you. This is not quite a continuation, but if you were to have an Abney administration at this campus, And considering that there have been many challenges and challenges and as well as opportunities, what would be your vision for Northwestern State?
I'm glad you asked that. For me, the central vision the central points around my vision are that we have excellence in everything we do. And I know that sounds a little abstract, but I think if we have a goal to do everything we can as best we can to serve students and to take care of our faculty and our staff, then we're not going to go wrong. And so I think we really start by things like the 511 committee that I talked about earlier, where we start to streamline and look at our processes. The second thing is looking at our programs. We recently formulated something that I jokingly call the crystal ball committee, but it's really the academic and occupational forecasting committee, where we've started looking at degree programs 5, 10, 15 years out, what the needs are going to be in the state down the road. And so we have brought in community folks. Jim Clinton was with us at one of the meetings. We're going to have Kurt Isink come and work with us. We're also working with a futurist consultant who may be coming in with us as well to help us sort of look long-term at where we need to go with our degree programs, because it's not enough to just be flexible and nimble and able to really, respond to the current economy. But I think you really have to be proactive and go forward and have a vision for where we need to be, not just, right now, but 5, 10, 15 years out.
Okay. And how would you describe your leadership style that will help you get there?
Well, I do believe in a lot of collaboration and consulting a lot of people. I love the fact, and I talked about this with Dr. Woodley last night at dinner, and my deans can attest to this. Sometimes I might think I have the best idea in the world, and so I'll call my deans together and I'll say, hey, I've got this wonderful idea. It's going to be great. Let's do this. And one of them will look at me and go, really? And then we start talking. And then, sometimes I see my great idea might be a good idea if we tailored it, or maybe it's just not the right idea at this time. Or maybe they've got a better one. Okay, well, that's a good idea, but maybe we do this instead. And so that's just how I like to lead, is by bouncing ideas off other people, by working through and getting feedback. Because, again, if you don't have consensus and buy-in, your great idea doesn't go anywhere.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go back to some of the things you've already talked about in terms of some of the constraints in the budget. And this faculty member expressed a growing concern over salary increases, which have had an effect on morale. And they would like to know what your approach would be to evaluate this issue and address salary equity among faculty and staff.
I think, and this is something the deans and I have talked a lot about lately, is looking at current salaries. And we know some of our disciplines are, the positions are very underfunded. They really are. And some are appropriately funded, which is great. But we've got to work on bringing the equity, and we do have a university committee that we usually use, a pay plan committee, to help us sort of balance those equities and those inequities. And in the past, when we've had funding, we've been able to use that committee. Unfortunately, we haven't had any funding to give for raises, but we are working this year, and Dr. Webb announced this at the luncheon the other day. We are going to be giving a small adjustment. We're putting that through in October at the board meeting, I believe, to our faculty and our unclassified staff, and restoring our civil service merits and our promotion raises. So we are making some moves in the right direction for this, but I think it's going to take a sustained kind of serious look at the data and that information about salary compression, so we can bring everybody to equity, or as close as we can get to equity.
Okay, thank you. This one is very eloquently written, so I'm going to read it as is. As you know, NSU was founded as the first institution in the state to provide a teacher preparation program. For over 130 years, we have prepared thousands of educators for their daily work, and we are known nationally for producing high-quality educators. However, it has become more challenging to produce the quantity of graduates that we once did. There are 29 teacher preparation providers in the state. If chosen as NSU's next president, what level of support will you dedicate to the enhancement of teacher education at this institution?
It is our legacy program. Teacher education is huge for us, not only because of the great work that our faculty do over there, but also because of their connection to workforce. And as we've looked forward, and you guys might not see this right now, but as we've been working to reformulate our adult ed program, that's one of those that has an absolute connection to workforce and will be, I think, a huge boon to workforce development. And we've spoken with LED about this. They've given us some good input. So, you know, I see the College of Ed as very, very important to the mission of the institution. I think it will remain so. Even though there are a lot of other people in, you know, the teacher prep world now, that doesn't mean, though, that we don't have a place there. And I think we should always maintain that. The things we've done with our new teacher prep online program are tremendous. It's been amazing to watch what the students have done in that program. I've talked with faculty who teach in that program and seen some student work samples, and the teachers that are coming out of that program are going to do great things. And so I think that teacher ed will always have a place here.
Thank you. Could you please describe your plans to bring more students to campus, especially face-to-face enrollment? And also within that, could you address what you see as the future of restoring some of the programs that were eliminated and possibly looking at a master's and a doctorate in education degrees?
Just making notes so I don't forget, that was a long question. First thing, we've recently been talking about this, about the face-to-face enrollment. And so one thing that we're going to be looking at is looking closely at our scholarship packages and how we package aid, because we do about 90% of our students are on some type of financial aid. So obviously scholarship aid is very important for students, but we also have to look at that, and we have to think about strategically about how we're going to award that. One thing that we came to recently is many of our students who would be interested in attending Louisiana Scholars College, because they do have high ACT, high GPA, they are being courted by lots of other institutions. Well, we have an early bird scholarship deadline, which is in October. So if a student after, say, December realizes, well, you know, maybe I can't afford to go to Harvard, or maybe I can't afford to go, you know, off, and they want to come back to Northwestern, we're out of scholarships at that point because we have the early bird deadline. So we're going to adjust some of our scholarship awards for those high-end students so that we're holding back some scholarships for those students. We think that is going to make a big difference in getting that cohort of students in. We will, of course, continue to do the kind of intense high school recruiting we've always done, but I think there's going to have to be some expansion, and we talked about the idea that we used to do this a long time ago, of having students and faculty go back to their old high schools and recruit from their old high schools and you know, go back and tell a friend, basically. Oftentimes, a freshman or sophomore student who's coming to Northwestern is so much closer to a senior in high school that emotionally, the things that they can tell a student are going to be much more powerful than if a bunch of older folks went out and visited the schools. Although we still do our share of that, and I think it's very important. The other thing that I think we can expand is our outreach programs, things like our Project Lead the Way, our National Writing Project, essay contest activities, the things we do with the Louisiana Studies Conference. We have an essay contest there that reaches out to 8th graders through high school. So we're doing a lot of that stuff, but I think we can do more. We have the Demon Math Classic. We have other activities that have been done in the past that I think we can revive to bring in that traditional kind of face-to-face student. But at the end of the day, we all know that demographic is a shrinking demographic, unfortunately. So we have to be very strategic about it. We have to really rely upon analytics to figure out the best cohort of students that we'll retain. And we know that home life, home environment plays a big role in this. And that's a factor that sometimes you can't see on paper. You know, you don't actually see that till the student gets here. But, you know, we work with that. And I think that those kinds of things, plus enhancing our international recruiting. We have had tremendous success, thanks in large part to Dr. Marcus Jones for his work with our Latin American recruiting. We have really enhanced our recruiting from Colombia. We have about 35 students from Colombia on campus seeking a 4-year degree. Those are 35 students we wouldn't have had if he hadn't done all that work to get them here. And so he and Dr. Kilcoyne and I and many other people have made trips to Colombia doing recruiting, and it's working. But it takes a sustained effort. And so that's something that I think down the road we're going to have to see an enhancement of our international office, because we don't, I mean, right now we're sort of all doing it independently, you know, these sort of pockets of international recruiting going on, and we need something more formalized to really reach out to those students. But I think we can kind of recast what we're already doing and get a little bit better success rate.
Okay. And would you speak to the reestablishment of the degrees?
Right, yes. We actually have been talking, and of course, once our Doctor of Nursing practice degree is completely approved, we actually have 2 programs that are sort of in the pipeline that departments have committed to that they would like to move forward as potential practice doctorates. We know it is not our mission to offer PhDs, but certainly practice doctorates are a different story, and I think that there is a possibility for that. But there has to be a demonstrated need for those things, and then we have to have good data that show that these are not duplicated programs, because we know at this point there's no room for duplication in those kinds of programs at that level, so in the state. So nothing in the region anyway that needs to be duplicated.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Woodley, we have no further questions.
Okay, are there further questions of the committee? Okay, at this time, we're going to meet in executive session to discuss personnel matters under revised Louisiana Statute 4217. Just a reminder, while we are in executive session, there will be no motions or any votes. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Erica, can we please have a roll call vote?
Dr. Massima Bazzari? Mr. Edward Crawford? Mr. Adam Lafort? Mr. Jimmy Long? Mr. Wayne Parker? Mr. Robert Shreve? Mr. Winfred Sabille? It is unanimous.
What's that?